Hello, welcome back to the Transforming Work videocast. My name is Jonathan. I am the manager at the People and Culture Association. Of course, the Transforming Work videocast with David Liddle is brought to you by the PCA, which is a membership think tank. We have around 600 members who join us from different parts of the globe. So if you're not a member yet at the PCA and you're joining us live today, or you're watching this on record, it's very simple. You can join a great hub of people and culture and leadership professionals, those who are into coaching, conflict resolution, mediation, so many spaces, so many different positions, and so many different, I would say, professions trying to really make better working conditions for us at the modern workplace. So if you're not a member yet, all you got to do is scan that QR code on your screen and you can join the PCA for free. That's right. You heard it right. It's for free. So we meet in the last week of every month. That's once again a great opportunity for the members to kind of share best practices, talk about challenges, also share their success stories. So we'll be meeting actually next week on the 30th of October for this month's member meet. So once again, if you're not a member yet at the PCA, great chance to once again join this perfect opportunity for us to once again network with each other. Great, but today it's all about two very special guests. We have Natasha Giles and Ashna Sinha joining us on the Transforming Work videocast with David Liddle. Now, they have got exceptional CVs, and I'm not going to try and get to the whole of it, but let me quickly introduce you to Natasha Giles. For those of you who do not know her that well yet, she's, of course, worn many hats, from HR business partner to L&D lead, regional director, and most recently now, the chief people officer, or the people director, rather, at Evolution. Natasha, thank you so much for joining us on the Transforming Work videocast.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Of course, your journey has spent, Natasha, in different sectors: financial services, fitness, tech, public sector consulting. And we're going to dive into all those spaces. And I hope you've got some really nice stories to share with us about how you've made people and culture everybody's business. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. I want to quickly, of course, introduce you to Ashna Sinha as well, who is the Chief People Officer at Betches Media. Ashna, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Of course, you've stepped into the organizational, the organization Betches Media at a crossroads. It was a space where it was just about to be acquired by Lad Bible, and of course, you were at that stage with the organization where it was moving from a startup to now suddenly into a key player in a public company. So a lot of really, really interesting experiences, I'm sure, for you to talk to us about transforming culture, about kind of making culture everybody's business. So once again, thank you so much for joining us on the videocast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. And holding the conversation together is the HR most influential 2025, David Liddle. And he knows that I always embarrass him with that introduction, but he's, of course, the president of the PCA, and, of course, the CEO and the founder of the TCM Group. And, of course, Natasha and Ashna have contributed to his very, very interesting book that's coming up in January 2026. It's called People and Culture. David, thank you so much once again for joining us and hosting this Transforming Work videocast.
Amazing, Jonathan. It's always good to be here, and it's so exciting to hear you say that the PCA membership is free. So please do come and join us. Just to reiterate that, it's so fantastic, isn't it? Come and join an amazing community of people leaders doing some great work, as we'll be hearing today. Thank you, Jonathan. Great to be here, as always.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. Before I hand it over to the three of you, if you're joining us live, use the comment section on YouTube and LinkedIn. You can drop in a comment, an opinion, a question for the speakers today. You don't have to agree with everything they're saying. And you can always have a different view, and you can share that with us, and we'll be more than happy to address it if we can on live, actually, on the videocast. But having said that, once again, Natasha, Ashna, David, the virtual studio is all yours.
Jonathan, thank you so much. A very warm welcome, everybody, to our Transforming Work videocast. If you're listening to us live on LinkedIn or YouTube, please let us know where you're listening to us from. It's always nice to see people dialing in. We get people dialing in from across the world to be part of these conversations. And if you're listening to us on demand, welcome. It's great to have you here. Please do let us know what you think of today's conversation. We'd love to hear from you. There'll be loads of chances for conversations and chat and for you to ask questions as we're going along. But what I'd like to do is invite our two guest speakers today, our VIPs, to tell us a little bit about themselves and their journeys into this wonderful space of people, culture and leadership. And Ashna, we spoke when, as Jonathan mentioned, writing the book, and I really was absolutely fascinated and inspired by the work you're doing and the support you're providing in Betches Media to provide a sort of focus on a people-centered workplace. I was curious, Ashna, telling us a little bit about how did you get into the world of people and culture, and how did you end up as Chief People Officer in this really interesting space?
Yeah, thank you. It's been quite a journey. I didn't actually start in HR. I think many of us sort of fall into it over time. So I started in strategy consulting, but I was always sort of obsessed with, this idea of how people decisions can drive business results and have, really an outsized impact on how an organization thrives. And over time, I found myself drawn to the people problems, as we call them, whether it was culture or leadership or org design. And so I pivoted into human capital work. One of my first in-house roles was at Coty, the beauty company, right as it was going through a very transformative moment in time, merging with Procter & Gamble specialty beauty business. And so I was at the front lines of an entire post-merger integration and restructuring effort, and really got to, get up close and personal with this idea that HR can be deeply strategic. I ended up transforming that into, a role at Richemont, the parent company of Cartier and a number of other luxury maisons, where I was overseeing talent strategy across the Americas during a time of incredible change and evolution. This was, 2020. We had COVID. We had the racial justice movement here in the U.S. and any number of other transformations that were, just sort of associated with the business anyway. And so, I've always found myself drawn to organizations that are going through moments of change and transformation. And so when the opportunity to join Betches came along, I sort of jumped at the chance. This was shortly after our Lad Bible acquisition. And since then, I've essentially been focused on building our people and culture function from scratch. So professionalizing the operating model, really putting a lot of foundational muscles in place and starting to stretch and condition them. But through it all, the entire sort of thread across the journey has been this idea of connecting strategy with structure, with the humanity of it all, so that we're creating cultures that really allow people and performance to thrive together.
Wow. And how do you go about setting something up from scratch? And is there a playbook that you were using? What kind of was inspiring you, Ashna, on that journey of kind of evolving something from the very beginning, from that inception? What was how did you go about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to keep in mind when you're entering an organization where not a lot of these concepts have been formalized before, there is no other, comparison for people to think about, right? And so the nice part about that is you really get to design the function from scratch and sort of set the structures up the way you want to. And you can really, customize them to where the organization is in their journey. So for us, for example, we've got a fairly, young population in the office. And so with a lot of Gen Z and millennial employees, there are different sort of generational things to keep in mind as well, different ways that people like working, how they interact with each other. And so a lot of what we've been doing is putting, programs and processes in place that feel very authentic to our DNA and to our population. So making sure that we're really, emphasizing structures that enable rather than just create process for the purpose of, paperwork. Right? How can we really enable performance, enable productivity, enable connection amongst our people and with our audience as well, since we are a external facing consumer brand.
And I kind of just reading through the case study this morning before we spoke. And one of the things that really stood out for me as well from the conversation that we had earlier in the year was about the relationship that you had with leaders and seeing leaders as sort of co-creating and helping to shape the workplace culture. It felt very much like a collaborative effort. And whilst you were designing and developing this sort of new people and culture oriented approach, it felt very much that you're bringing leaders with you to be part of that journey and shaping their, not just the sort of the words or the language, but the capabilities that your managers and leaders needed within Betches to help deliver that vision. We'll dig in more into that, Ashna, but I was just kind of curious to sort of get that sense of that collaborative co-creation model that you were developing there.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said this in any organization that I've been in, your managers are your force multipliers, right?
Yeah.
If you can crack the code with, getting really great managers in place who, are able to motivate their teams, guide their people, they're going to be the ones who are helping you run the organization by managing up, managing down, and managing sideways, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, I think they're really the key to a lot of our success. And so the idea was, how can we equip our managers, whether it's the first time they have someone that they're, is reporting into them, or whether they're an experienced leader, how do we make sure that they have the tools to feel equipped to navigate conversations that'll come up with their teams, and move through the organization with integrity and confidence.
Wow, Ashton. I mean, I think this is, to me, I know people that I've spoken to over many years in relation to the evolution of the sort of people and culture and function, the emergence of that. It's almost the biggest challenge that they experience, and also the biggest prize that they gain, is when they achieve that collaboration and that alignment with their leaders. And Natasha, coming to you, and I know, just again reading through the case study and the work that you provided for the book, you were saying something very similar there, Natasha, around, I think you talk about kind of co-creation, not compliance, Natasha. But it'd be great to find out a bit about you, Natasha, and your journey into this amazing space of people, culture, and leadership.
Sure. So I probably have had very different kind of journey through people and culture. So I started in a kind of traditional way, doing kind of HR admin, but then moved into a coaching type of space, and then a specialist role in recruitment, working at Price Waterhouse in South Africa, and kind of working in a much larger scale business with loads of moving parts and loads of different leaders and personalities to work through. And at my time there, I then moved into a regional kind of Africa role around employee engagement. Yeah. And that really, I think, made me recognize how much I like to work with not just the processes on kind of getting things done and being compliant, but actually the stuff that really changes people's experience at work, and, as Asha said, the results as well. Yeah. I left there and I joined a startup, and that was like a generalist role, doing all of it, and really exciting, similar to your experience, Ashna, where you get to create things from scratch and you get to really be kind of push the boat out a bit and be a bit creative. You know what you want to achieve, but you can find cool and interesting ways to do it. And to your point, the most important part is having leaders and then managers who recognize the value that the function can bring. Because without that recognition, you spent all your time trying to convince leaders you can add more value than pushing a process. Yeah. So when you have that kind of collaboration, it really makes the role exciting and the impact real. I then have spent loads more time in the consulting space, then with a technology consulting business, first in South Africa, and then I moved to the UK about 7 years ago. And that is a global business, again, with its own complexities, but having that buy-in from leaders of the value that the function can bring really made it wonderful. And then I took a huge jump and moved into the fitness industry, which was really just another exciting challenge. It was an industry I wasn't used to, a culture I wasn't used to, a global business, but again, really people-centered. They had strong, values that everybody knew and lived by, and could see the value of having a people function that helped to, deliver for their teams, and how that translated into kind of business results. And that was during COVID, when the fitness industry was having a really hard time. And I think that for me was like a real defining moment, and how people and culture really needs to shift, because it became so much about equipping managers to deal with this unprecedented thing that was happening to all of us, really making it managers' kind of responsibility to think about how we maintain culture, how we maintain people's well-being, how we stay connected. It was like a pivotal moment where potentially there were managers who previously thought, oh, culture sits with the people team, who suddenly had this aha moment that, oh my God, I need to do all this stuff to help kind of maintain that. So I find that there's been a real shift since COVID, managers kind of seeing more of that responsibility with them. I then again moved to a consulting business within the healthcare sector, so technology business but within healthcare. There it was really exciting because private equity backed. It's a very different working kind of in that environment. And Ashna's point, you know, around the results for the business and being able to kind of tangibly show that the activity you're doing within that people space translates to some sort of business results, I think is great. And then I've took some time off, had a sabbatical. So David, when I contributed to your book, I was having some time off, and very recently just joined another software business, global business, Evolution. I've only been at Evolution for about 5 days. So,
oh wow. How's it going?
Yeah, so very new. Can't comment lots on that, but yeah, I would love to discuss some of the experience and things I've seen in the past. But things that Ashna is describing are absolutely true. If you have the leadership behind you and they're willing to co-create and see the value of kind of bringing your people strategy and your business strategy all together, the value you can bring is such a game changer, rather than kind of sitting in your own little space behind closed door trying to figure it out on your own. It just makes such a difference. And then having strong managers who want to take that people element of their role seriously is, just completely shifts the needle.
Wow. So fascinating stories, Natasha. Thank you. And Ashna as well. It's really, there's so much there we're going to be able to unpack. But I was asked a question today by a journalist, and I haven't been able to kind of figure out the answer. So I'm going to ask you, Natasha and Ashna, to help me here. So the question went along the lines of, if the management of our organizations are focusing on the woke issues, almost quote unquote, of ED&I and people-centered work and social justice, is that not taking management away from the important business of running their businesses effectively? That's broadly the question I was asked by the journalist. Haven't quite got back to them yet, because I thought, what better place to test our thoughts on the concept of value and people and justice and woke issues like ED&I and so on and so forth, and whether or not actually treating people with compassion, kindness and fairness is good for business, or is it deviating our leaders away from the core aspects of running a profitable, successful organization? So before I go back to the journalist with my responses, what do you think? Ashna, what do you think to that? And what would you say if you were being asked a question like that, which you just have?
It's all one and the same, right? I mean, what other role do we have as a manager or as a leader than to, help guide our teams with responsibility, but also empathy, right? I mean, I think it was Gartner's research that said, the two things that drive employee happiness and satisfaction is A, do I have a best friend at work who I can, share things with and vent to when needed? And B, does my manager care about me as a human being? Right. So, how we are in our lives outside of work and how we are in our work lives, they're so interconnected. And so I think, the role that we play as managers and leaders is so critical in shaping the experience that any employee will have in the organization, how they think about the company, how they think about work in general. And so I think it's a really big responsibility to take on. And, as HR functions and people functions, part of the role that we play is in helping to equip them to take on that responsibility with confidence.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, great. That's a really, really powerful response, I think, because it kind of really connects people, culture, and business success and business performance, and the role that our managers play in shaping that and crafting that space for us to thrive and flourish is good for business. And I wondered, Natasha, what your thoughts might be in relation to is this stuff a distraction from the hard strategic task of running successful high wealth businesses or high growth businesses?
I think that post-COVID, that seems like just a ludicrous question, that these things are like separate. We were so entrenched in each other's lives and had to consider people's mental health and their accessibility and all sorts of things, that to somehow now, like, we were treating people like full human beings, and then to somehow now go, oh, well, because that's over, we're going to revert back seems just like, how would you even do that? How do you switch off that part of like your brain and stop behaving in that way? I also think, younger people are coming into the workforce.
Yeah.
They are joining organizations that align with their values.
Yeah.
We know that most people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So there's tangible, like how fast your business can grow, your turnover, your attrition is all kind of so closely linked to what employees feel when they're working and at work, that it almost feels like a no-brainer. Like I don't feel like there's a need, like it's not woke, it's treating people like human beings and recognizing that people have different needs, different lived experiences, and they bring that to work. They can't not. And for younger people who joined the workforce during COVID, they've only known that.
Yeah.
They've only ever known that. So how do we go back? I just can't, in my mind, I just don't think we can go back to how we were pre-COVID, and that separation of kind of, there's my work self and then my real self, like that line's gone.
Yeah. There's just myself and my truth and my connections with me, with you, with us together. And how do we as managers, with our support of our people teams, create these wonderful spaces to show up and do our best work and be our best selves? And that has to be the priority from both the individual's perspective in terms of doing my best work, but for the organizations on aggregate, when that happens, we are delivering high performing, productive workplaces. Well, I think you've both given me the answer very clear, but I love that it's a ludicrous question, because I completely agree with you. And why would we go back to looking at it through that more oppositional or binary perception of it has to be business or people? It can be business and people and culture all at the same time, and that's where I think managers can be most effective. But they don't always buy into this. I just wonder, Ashna and Natasha, what kind of obstacles have you had if you've been obviously in different organizations, and Ashna more recently for you, shaping the people and culture agenda at Betches Media? What sort of obstacles have you come up against? What sort of challenges have you faced? And how do you overcome some of those? Let's start, Ashna, because you started with a blank sheet of paper and you started with that. So let's just dig in there. What kind of obstacles have you experienced in the past, and how have you overcome those kind of obstacles and challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is when you're creating all of these things from scratch, right? You really do start with that blank sheet of paper, right? And you can sort of design things the way you want to, which is such a wonderful opportunity, especially coming out of organizations that were much more traditional and sort of mature, where often you pick up things and then you have to break them and remake them, right? So it's nice to kind of start from scratch. But I think, the challenge is we're a very creative organization. Right. We're in the media space and, very much helping to shape the cultural conversation out there. And so, there's a lot of creative energy, and the sort of culture and DNA of the organization is very similar to our outward facing, external brand. And so one of the things that we always have to keep in mind as we're putting these programs in place is, how can we make sure that it doesn't feel overly corporate, right? Or overly big company, because we are still, small and scrappy, and I don't think that's going to change, right? Nor do we want it to. And so, as we put things in place, whether it's, performance management frameworks or tools for managers, or, whatever programmatic things we're implementing, we're trying to adapt them so that it feels really authentic to us as well as our aspirations. Right? Because if it feels overly corporate, then it won't resonate with our population. And, and then at that point, what's the point, right? The whole idea is to put things in place that can enable productivity and, get people to be focused on the right things at the right time and moving forward together.
I mean, and so there's a link to that role of the manager and leader, creating those spaces for people to be able to live, if like, the values. And do you think about, you talked about the kind of the customer experience, the kind of consumers of your media output, but you're sort of bringing those values within the organization. I'm talking at a conference next month about the concept of the employee, the consumer employee, it's called. Do you think of your employees as consumers of systems and processes, Ashna, of values and of management? And if so, what kind of changes do you have to make in terms of the way you work if your employees are consumers or customers rather than if you like, commodities or resources to deliver an output through their labor and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that has been a very unique challenge, I think, to navigate at Betches, I didn't necessarily have this in previous organizations. We have a very public presence out in the internet, right, on social media and whatnot. And so a lot of people are very familiar with who we are because they watched our memes on Instagram, or they've seen our TikToks, or, what have you. And so then when they come to work with us, right, as an employee, you walk into the office and immediately everything looks familiar because it's what you've seen online all this time. And so they think that it's going to be exactly like what those reels are or those videos are. And so one of the interesting things that we've had to navigate, particularly with new hires, is yes, we have this external facing brand and it's one that's very familiar, and yeah, we are like that internally, but you are still in a workplace. It is a professional workplace. You have targets, you have metrics. It's a business. We have to make money, etc. Right? And so how do you balance those two things where, okay, you're not just coming in and, making memes and kind of creating fun content all day long and, spending time with celebrities and whatnot, but truly we are running a business. So how do we find the value in each of those things? You're lucky you get to work on really fun things all day, but they're also creating value for our clients. They're creating value for our consumers, for our audience. And so how do you harness, all of that energy, but channel it in a way so that people understand how they're contributing to those broader company goals, right? It's not just about creating fun content. It is actually serving a purpose. Our clients are coming to us for a point of view. And they care about the audience that we're cultivating. And so how do we help them solve the problems that they are facing as they're trying to advertise to their consumers? So helping our most junior employees really understand their piece of the puzzle, I think has been a very interesting challenge to navigate.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. We're going to come back to that as well, I think, in terms of that sense of a purpose and how we're aligned to the purpose. And I just wonder, Natasha, similar questions here, the kind of challenges you may have overcome and obstacles, and how, I'm going to dig into a part of the book, which I thought was really interesting when you were describing the sort of HR, the sort of legacy HR. You talked about transactional stuff, hiring, firing, compliance, being hygiene factors. And what's really moving the needle is the systems that help people to thrive. I love that. So, Natasha, what kind of challenges do you face helping to articulate that sense of almost spiritual purpose underpinning your work? I hear it's spiritual. You might say it's a bit too much, David. It's Friday.
I think throughout my career, what I've faced, varying degrees at various organizations, has been HR has the PR problem. HR is hire, fire, you create roadblocks, you're here just to, mitigate risk, and it devalues the kind of value you can bring. So I think it's working through that PR kind of problem. And sometimes it's delivering something and then that kind of builds your credibility. Other times it doesn't matter what you do, you just can't change some people's view on it. So that's one of the challenges. I think another is, so you've overcome that challenge and you have people around the table who agree you can add more value, but getting them to get some time to prioritize co-creating things. So there's this almost logical acceptance that the people function can add value, but actually then getting your hands dirty and saying, hey, we're going to co-create this together and get involved. That can sometimes be challenging when people are, specifically leaders who are, got sales and numbers and things that they're concerned about. It's important, but these things almost take precedence, and it's working through that can be challenging. I also think it's coming back to the PR problem, is having leaders recognize that the people function can be commercial. Like we can we can't create a people strategy in isolation. We need to understand, from a leadership point of view, what are you trying to achieve, and how do we create a people strategy that enables that, not something on the side over here. And it's for some, for some professionals, or depending where you are in your career, it's difficult to have a voice or have a seat at that table. So I think a lot of the challenge just comes around how people perceive HR, the commercial value they bring, and how they enable the business to move forward. And if you land in an organization where, unfortunately, there isn't that recognition and that time for the people leader to be involved in conversations, to collaborate with, it just makes it so much harder to achieve what you can. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is how do we rehabilitate kind of HR's brand and reputation? Because I don't know if you find that.
I was going to say, I think the way you characterize it as a PR problem is so accurate. One of the things that I've told, HRBPs on my teams in the past is, I almost don't want you to be seen as the HR person at the table. I'd rather that you be seen as a business partner first, right? And really be able to speak the language of your stakeholders. Because if you can, put everything in words that they're going to understand, whether it's, if you're describing an employee engagement strategy and you're talking about it the same way that your sales and marketing leaders talk about the customer journey in a boutique or online as they're going through, the purchase journey, that parallelism helps make the partnership with your people partners so much more effective and impactful. So I always appreciate when, there are people team members who bring that sort of commercial first mindset to the table.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, that's how I would prefer to be viewed as well. It's like, I'm a business partner who knows a lot about HR.
Yeah.
But I'm not please don't call me the HR police, or like, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
No.
I love that. I think it's so powerful, isn't it? And I talk about in the book the concept of the people partner, because what my basic hypothesis is, people are the business. The business is defined by its culture, and our leaders shape the culture of our organization. So within that sentence, there's business, there's people, there's culture, and there's leaders. And when we kind of look at the lens of the people function through that focus on people, culture, leadership, and business, then we can start to see the role that the people partners are playing. And I think this shift away from transactional, rigid, bureaucratic, risk-averse, the legacy HR systems, which we recognise and honour and say, actually, they played their part. They had a role to play. But in the shifting world of work, and Natasha, you talked about COVID and the seismic shifts that happened through COVID, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the focus on climate action, justice, obviously now the focus on democratic systems, trust in our cherished institutions. There's so much that is changing in the way that we think about the world of work. But actually, we can start to see the role that the people professional is playing in helping to shape a really strong commercial environment where the organization thrives. Because ultimately, the customers expect our organizations to be better. The investors expect our organizations to be better. Your talent expects the organization to be better. So we want to get the top talent, the best customers, and retain those customers, and secure the best investment and drive investor sentiment. People, culture, leadership play such a significant part to play in that. And it feels that you're both bringing that into your organizations. And I wondered, Natasha, 5 days into your new role, is this part of the work that you'll be doing in your new organization, in your new role, and what's your vision for the role?
I think right now, just getting a lay of the land.
Yes, figuring it out.
Getting a lay of the land, and I think as I look to kind of start to shape what does a people strategy look like, I think. We've just completed an engagement survey, which is the one piece. Well, what are the employees saying? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Where are their pain points? What are they proud of?
Yeah.
Then there's a piece around the leadership and, well, what are they thinking? What are the objectives? What are they proud of? What do they want to move forward? And then there's a piece around, to your point, investors and what is it that we're trying to achieve in the next year, 2, 3 years, getting that really clear so that we have an engagement, we have a people strategy that meets the needs of our people. They can actively see they've been heard, and meets the needs of the business. So is getting the right talent in, right performance, right, everything is structured in a way that enables the business to perform. And then the final piece around, well, what are the foundational things that we need to work to make sure for our investors we have a sustainable, scalable business? So at the moment, the people kind of feedback piece I've already started doing, but there's those other two chunks that I still need to get stuck in. But that's where my thinking's at, is with those, key pieces of information. That's what you want to do. Is you don't want to just build a strategy that's addressing the burning issues that are happening right now, because that's not a strategy. That's just reacting to whatever noise is going on. But is taking a view with those key kind of stakeholders in mind, and something that longer term is going to help stabilize and grow the business. So that's where I'm at.
It's really fascinating to hear you say that, because I think when it's sort of when it's reactionary to certain circumstances, it makes us all look really busy. We're all busy reacting to certain circumstances, and that is important. One has to address those. But what I think I'm hearing you say, Natasha, is to create a coherent strategic alignment between the people strategy and the business strategy. Because when they aren't aligned, or there's one that's an adjunct to the other, it creates a gap between the two strategies, and that gap creates divergence and a vacuum. And in the vacuum is where culture grows. Misunderstanding, lack of clarity, uncertainty, volatility, fear, frustration, anxiety, a lack of communication, lack of clarity of roles, lack of clarity around objectives. And that then ferments and develops what I describe as culture shock, or that can morph into a toxic culture. And it sounds like you instinctively can see that the alignment between the two reduces the gap, and therefore reduces the propensity for some of those more negative aspects of our culture to creep in, because you're creating that clear alignment, and it feels very aligned for your vision, and not performative or reactionary, but maybe taking that longer term view and recognizing it won't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But it's going to help to drive us forward in shaping that positive culture. We're going to come back to that. Sorry, go ahead, Natasha. Please.
And I think, taking the time to do that also helps position us as the people team in a position where we are commercial. We're not just reacting to what we're seeing on the ground. We are thinking longer term. We are looking to enable and, get to the end of the financial year that investors can look and say, hey, this is really added value. Because when you're just reacting, that you're kind of keeping things calm, but it's really hard to go, oh, look at the value I brought, because you're just firefighting constantly. And then that kind of perpetuates that HR PR problem. So it's trying to mitigate that kind of PR problem.
I love that. I think you've given some great, hopefully everyone who's listening to today's Transforming Work videocast, we're having a wonderful conversation about the emergence and the evolution of the people and culture function. But what we're hearing there, and I'm going to come to your question, Santana, in a moment, you've had a great question, but what we're hearing here is a real playbook for how do we create a modern people and culture function. And Ashna, you've been nodding furiously with that sense of strategic alignment and the work that Natasha's been setting out there in terms of positioning the people function to address this sort of PR crisis that I also think isn't just about people's perception of HR from the outside in. I think it's impacting on HR's own sense of its own self. And, some of the research I drew on when I was writing the book, Joe Burrell did a really interesting piece of research, having interviewed and heard from 1,500 HR professionals, and continues to speak about burnout within the HR profession and people leaving the HR function. So I think it's not just external PR, but it's also people's sense of self. And I saw you nodding furiously, Ashton. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on what Natasha was saying and how you're also creating that clear strategic alignment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really a constant evolution for HR leaders right now is all of the different hats that we wear every day, right? Whether it's, the chief culture officer, the chief AI integration officer, the compliance person, the help me navigate a tough situation and deliver bad news person, right? We play so many different roles every day because, your people problems are every problem, right? Yeah. And so, I think there is a very real sense of burnout and, exhaustion amongst HR professionals everywhere. But I think one of the things that keeps me going as I think about, what is the next strategy we need to put in place or what are the next programs we need to shift focus to it really comes back to what can we do to help our people do their jobs better, right? At the end of the day, HR, we are resources for the humans. It's in our name, right? How do we help our teams, our leaders, our managers do their jobs better? Whether it's helping them be more effective, more impactful, more productive, just feel more confident and equipped to do what they need to do. And I think, when you have those moments where somebody from, your organization comes to you and says, oh, I used that tool that you gave me and it helped, it helped me figure out how to answer, my employee's question or whatever the situation is. Those moments are so rewarding, right? Because it makes it worth it. And you see the impact that these things have on our teams. It's very easy to sort of forget that bigger picture when you're, trying to implement something and working through the change management of it all and getting the buy-in and getting it all going. But once it's live and out there and, that young first-time manager comes to you and says, oh, I used your competencies or I used the values framework and here's why it's the business case for this person to get promoted. I'm using the tools you gave me. It's so gratifying and it makes it worth it.
You gave a great example when we for the book, which obviously when we did interview it sort of in the book, you talked about an example. I think it was a particular employee who was struggling in their role, and you applied what I sort of broadly labelled as a sort of more of a transformative justice model, moving down the sort of blame and punishment style, which perhaps some of our old systems have taken us down, and unwittingly we find ourselves in these combative situations. You talked about a situation, Ashna, where you sought to identify what their skills and capabilities were and match those skills and capabilities to somewhere else within the organization. And we're able to position that individual elsewhere in the business, not kind of moving the problem around, because that's the old 1970s style of dealing with difficult issues in our workplace, but actually starting to say, okay, how do we match the individual's needs, skills, capabilities with the needs of the organization? Can you say a few more words about that? Because it's a very progressive way of thinking about the application of justice at work. I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. This particular employee was, a first-time manager. They'd never had direct reports, so it was a new muscle for them to stretch.
Yeah.
And there was also this perception that they were holding on to, that the only way you can grow your career is by taking on more direct reports and, taking on additional people to manage. And so we really sat down and had a very honest conversation with this person, and almost sort of explored out loud, right? Did a lot of brainstorming out loud of, well, what do you find interesting about your work? What is it that motivates you? What would be more inspiring or engaging? Where do you want to spend your time? And it turns out that this person was actually really focused on, well, I want to grow the brand, or I want to grow, this product that I'm working on. And it was less about, wanting to spend their time helping to teach the others on their team, right? And that's not for everybody. So that's okay, right? Not everybody needs to be a manager of others. Some people are better suited to be, really specialized, highly skilled individual contributors. And so we had a conversation with this person to say, look, if that's actually where you want to be spending your time and that's where your skill set and your strengths really are, great, we can make that happen, because we'd rather that you be engaged and able to bring your best self to the table, and spend your time in the areas where you excel. And so we were able to sort of reposition this person's role to focus in on the things they're great at. And it was a really, I think a nice outcome, because even for the people who were reporting into them before, shifted them to someone who was more equipped to be able to guide and, help direct their work as well. The whole idea, though, was, rather than treating the situation like a problem and how do we, rectify it, the idea was, how can we use this opportunity to help somebody grow in a way that feels really authentic, and supportive.
What a massive reframe as well. And it sounds so simple when you're on a video cast on a Friday afternoon for the Transforming Work video cast for the People and Culture Association, which is free to join, by the way. And isn't that, however, what an amazing reframe, moving from a problem to an opportunity. And I think when we start to see these issues as problems, and the only tool in our toolbox is a hammer, retribution, blame, and punishment, then every single problem becomes a nail. And people aren't nails. People are complex and amazing and challenging. and full of opportunity and promise. And I think what was really stood out for me from that example, Ashna, was the efforts that you've gone to be able to support that person to realize their potential in other aspects of the organization. And I think there's a lot of learning for all of us there about repositioning problem as opportunity. Yet when you look at many legacy HR policies, they are about problem solving or preventing the problem becoming a risk. And I think you touched on this, Natasha, in terms of describing risk mitigation and some of the old legacy systems in HR throwing up some of those PR problems. Natasha, do you have any thoughts on Ashna's approach? And I know you've done work around listening exercises and ask me anything town hall type environment to create those spaces. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Natasha. And
I think that's fantastic. And I agree with you, David. It's not kind of the go-to approach.
Yeah.
I think it speaks a lot about kind of how we can really support individuals, but also how, if you've got the skill to reframe it, and there is that trust and openness with leaders, that when you present that to them, they're also open to listen to you about how you want to position it, that's fantastic. When I was thinking, as you were talking, Ash, I was thinking, there's a few people that come to mind. And I thought, if I approached them with that, how easy would it have been to change? It seems like the right approach, but it speaks a lot about the kind of relationships that you've fostered with the leaders and the culture within the business, that is possible.
Well, and it's about the psychological safety of it all, right?
100%.
Because in most organizations, you would look at that situation and say, oh, well, they're not performing, right? Time to say bye-bye, right? And so this was one of those situations where, well, does that have to be the answer? Isn't there a different path here? Because they're actually very good at these other things. Perhaps we've made a mistake in putting them in, in a capacity that they weren't quite ready for, or maybe not as suited for. So how can we, help our organizations, provide people with the space to make mistakes, right? Fail fast, fail forward. How do you grow from that?
And I think loads of organizations use that almost as kind of like, we fail fast and we fail forward, and they sound like sound bites.
Yeah.
When it actually comes down to it, how much do they really? And again, it comes to that psychological safety. And coming to what you mentioned, David, like I've had experiences where we've tried to build that psychological safety, particularly when we've had kind of leadership transitions as people have moved out and people moved up into different roles, of having those kind of like ask me anything sessions where it's like leaders being completely vulnerable. Obviously, it's all within reason, but people are adults. I mean, I think that's important. Like, let's treat people as adults. And when you actually put yourself out there to say, I'm here to answer any question. I recognize that you're uncomfortable, you're scared, you're nervous, whatever it is, ask me whatever you need to ask. And you can trust that 99% of the time, people will behave as adults and ask the right questions. But it goes such a far way in building that kind of psychological safety within the team, particularly in times of change, when there's loads of things that have happened and it feels like decisions are being made, by some elite group somewhere in some power. Just being open and transparent, building that psychological safety is really important.
Massive. And it gives that sense, because again, everything I've ever heard around employee engagement, employee experience, people experience, customer experience, it always comes down to some fundamental truths. And the truths are you listening to me? Are you seeking to understand me? Are you engaged with me? Do you value me? Do you appreciate my efforts? Not do you agree with me? Not do you take everything I'm saying as absolute the truth, and are we always going to do it my way? Just do you hear me? And I think the ability to have those ask me anything questions, that ability to listen, to learn rather than listening to defend, and seeing these moments as opportunities rather than problems, is framing this. So we get these magical 4 statements, and these, to me, these 4 statements go to the heart of creating a positive culture. I hear you, I see you, I appreciate you, I understand you. Now let's get to work. And when we get those moments, we connect, and having that sense of connection and common purpose. And I think you talked earlier about common purpose, Ashna, and giving people that sense of common purpose. The only way to get that is through the strategic alignment you talked about, Natasha. and closing that gap and that dissonance, but also then really going out and giving people a jolly good listening to and really hearing what they're saying. And it feels to me that when you have those two things happening at a local level, listening, coupled with a strong strategic narrative, the bit in the middle, the people function, the leadership and management function, becomes so much more effective and efficient. But let's go into one of our questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at our live video cast. This is so fantastic. I am loving this. What a great way to spend the Friday. So please do share any questions you have, any observations, any questions that you'd like to ask Natasha or Ashna about the experience of people, culture and leadership, and of course anything you'd like to check in with me, or of course any of your own experiences you'd like to share. What's worked? We talked about fail fast. Anything maybe that didn't work so well? What better place to share it than on our video cast today? But Santhana, you've talked about a piece of work you're coming into as a fractional chief HR officer. As it is, there seems to be a lot of negativity on the floor. You've described there. You've got a plan. That's always a good start, and an approach. But I just thought it would be good to listen to the panel on how you would start this piece of work and finish it with success for the culture enrichment program in this company. So I think the question from Santhana, and I think it's to an extent, Natasha, I think given that you're 5 days in, you're 5 days ahead of Santhana. So you've got a bit of a head start. So you're in a good place. And I think you set out some of the things that you were describing there, which was to observe and listen and learn and sort of consider what's been said through the engagement surveys. Where's the alignment between the strategies? But Natasha, drawing on Santhana's specific question, is there anything that you'd share as they're starting to prepare for their fractional CHR role?
So I guess the main thing for me would be, don't be too rigid with your plan. Like, it's good that you have a plan of what you want to go in and do, but don't be too rigid, because you don't know what you don't know yet. So the best advice for me was just be curious and really understand, whether it's through surveys, whether it's through just catching up with people, really understanding, that it's really a lot of negativity on the floor. Well, what's driving that? And so that you need to understand the thing you're trying to solve for. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, as I would go in, and I have done, is just listening, whether that's through surveys or whatever approach you take, and then understanding kind of like where the business is at, and is there a disconnect by kind of like, to your point, David, like it could be that they have this view and there's just some misalignment that's causing this negativity, and how you bridge that gap, and how do the leadership see what's happening on the floor, and just kind of getting really clear. I think so. Understanding the problem, be curious, don't be too rigid with your plan. And then what are the outcomes? Like, what is it that the business are expecting you to achieve at the end? And what are the people expecting? And how do you pull that together to hopefully then have a really consolidated plan that isn't just a shiny piece of paper, but something that actually helps, change the trajectory of whatever's going on the ground.
I love that. It's so powerful. So being curious, asking sometimes those silly questions, but they're not silly questions. They're the most important questions, observing what's happening, but also that sense of what are those objectives? What's the dream state or the desired state? And sometimes, and I don't know about yourselves, and Santhana, I don't know about your experience, but sometimes when we ask those questions, people aren't clear what those objectives are. And therein lies one of the problems that we have, is we immerse ourselves into an environment where the curiosity gets closed down because people want their agendas to be followed. So it's like we get assimilated into other people's agendas. The objectives aren't clear, so it becomes confusing. So we start to kind of hope, and we throw stuff at the wall, hoping it might stick. And then that causes us to then sometimes become more of a fixed mindset than a growth mindset to add to that growth. And I think I've
sometimes also heard, there's a challenge with the culture, and then you probe and you say, well, what is the culture? But no one can tell you what the culture is. Sometimes you have to even go as far as that, as like defining. We're talking about culture. What do you mean?
What's it mean?
What is it that there's lots of moving parts, but in your mind, what is the culture of this business? Have you even defined that? So getting really clear. So much of it is just clarity, connecting the dots, so people can feel like I'm heard, I'm seen. Oh, and I get where we're going. Great.
And then we can work towards that. we start to work towards. That's when the flywheel starts turning. We're starting to work towards. Wow, and Santhana, I hope you were enjoying that as much as I was, because there's some fantastic feedback, and that's in 5 days, and that's the work that you're bringing, Natasha and Shana. You've been through this. Ashton, rather, you've been through this process a lot in Betches Media. So what about yourself? With the benefit of hindsight, where would you start, and what advice would you provide for Santhana?
Yeah, I would say that the listening tour doesn't stop, right? I mean, that's something that you have to keep on doing. It's not a one and done, it's a constant. And that's what's going to help you figure out those priorities, because there's going to be, any number of things that needs to be worked on, right? There's always going to be another fire of the day. But I think being able to really be crisp and clear on where are we trying to get to, right? What's the goal here? And what's the aspiration, and how do we make sure that we're choosing our priorities so that it matches up to that, right? There's always going to be 20 different things that need to get done yesterday. One of the things that I always think back to, a previous manager shared this with me a number of years ago after an engagement survey that yielded many themes to be worked on. And he said, we can only really do one of these well. Otherwise we'll, be doing not enough in all the different topics. So pick one, do 2 things about it, and then talk about it 3 times.
Good advice.
Deep diving as well. I think that's so important as well, because it can be spread out, and we can do too much, and then it becomes stressful. We lose sight of our priorities. So staying focused on those key points, on those core actions, and celebrating them and talking about them and communicating them. And I was listening to you speak. You talked about crisp and clear. Natasha, you were talking about curiosity. There was something around connectivity. Now, in my book, I talk about the 7 C's, but we're now up to about 15 different C's. I've got curiosity, communicate, creativity, connection, crispness, clarity, curiosity. Goodness me, there's some amazing ideas there that are starting to come through. But it really helps us to focus on what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and also, and I think this was really important from what I think both of you are saying, why are we trying to do it? What's the why? How do we fly that why? So we understand, and you understand, and we all understand why we're doing what we do. What's that purpose, I think?
And I think curiosity was one that it took me a bit of time in my career to get there, because I think, there were moments where I felt like I had to be the expert and I had to have the answer. And when you're sitting in that space, you kind of, you make snap decisions, and you maybe don't delve into the problem enough and ensure that your solution is the right thing. So that being curious was something it's really beneficial if you can kind of get yourself into that mindset.
Isn't that an interesting comment to perhaps wrap up today's video cast on there, Natasha? Is that the true essence of the people function and people leaders isn't about the knowledge that they bring, because we can gain and assimilate knowledge so quickly. Because if you ask me a question, I can get onto ChatGPT and pretty much give you an answer now. So any question that you ask me, I can come to you with and have a high level of knowledge, whether it's right or wrong. We'll cover that later. But actually, so that's not the best intelligence that I bring in to the room, my knowledge. The best thing I can bring into a room is my curiosity and my desire to learn. And perhaps the greatest gift that we bring as people leaders into cultural change and cultural transformation isn't our expertise and knowledge. It's the questions that we ask and the curiosity that we bring and the desire to learn from others, because then that is a gift that keeps on giving. Because I knew the questions, and you're asking Ashton the questions, and Ashton's asking her managers the questions, and we're all asking, and we're being curious. And what that does is it generates, to me, the currency of the future of work, which I describe very simply as insight, learning, growth, and creativity. And we can't AI those things yet. But if the people leader is bringing curiosity, then they're generating the bank for that currency to be loaded up. And that's where the true value comes. And I think both of you today have brought so much of that Fantastic. Thank you, Ashna. It's been such a joyful conversation. I knew it would be, because obviously it was such a fantastic contribution to my book as well. But Ashna, thank you so much for your contribution. So it's been really. And whereabouts are you? You're in the States.
I'm in New York. Yes, it's early morning here.
It's early morning. Well, thank you. Thank you for starting so early for us. It's been wonderful, Ashna. Thank you so much
for having me.
You're very welcome. And Natasha, thank you so much. And whereabouts are you, Natasha?
I'm in Hertfordshire in
lovely.
Dreary old England.
We're on the same time zone. I'm only across the border in Essex. Natasha, absolutely fine. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. And it was and what an amazing contribution to the book as well. I know people will really enjoy reading your case study and your observations on best practice, and we all wish you the very best in your new role 5 days in. But I think everything that you've been saying sets you in good stead for a very successful new role that you're in, Natasha. So we all wish you the very best with that. But thank you, both of you, for being part of the conversation. Thank you. I can see some great comments coming in. We just love these video casts. Please do share with people. Let them know that these are happening. This is really at the cutting edge of human resources and leadership. This is really where the shift is happening. We're seeing a huge change in the way we think about people, culture, and leadership. This is the conversation that we're having today, and this is where the real change is happening. And that's what we do at the People and Culture Association. Hey, Jonathan, this is what it's all about. And did you say it was free to join, Jonathan, as well? Did I hear you correctly?
It is.
Wow.
Well, this has been fascinating. It's always a rich conversation when you're speaking to practitioners or people in culture.
Absolutely.
It's no longer aspirational stuff. It's actual, tried and tested methods and experiences. And I think it makes the conversation really, really rich. But join us on a future videocast, Transforming Work videocast with David Liddle. We're going to be speaking to a lot of chief people officers and people directors and C-suite leaders. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do that and you get some more access to these videocasts. But Ashna, Tasha, and David, thank you so much once again, and we'll say goodbye to our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the day and the week.